The bell above the door made a soft sound as Yuna pushed it open. She loved that sound. It meant she was home, even though this was not really her home. It was her grandmother's cafe, but to Yuna, it felt like the same thing. Starlight Cafe sat on a quiet street in Neo Seoul. The city had changed so much in the last 50 years. Aliens walked the streets now. Ships flew overhead instead of just airplanes. The world was bigger than anyone had imagined. But Grandmother Bora's cafe stayed the same. The walls were warm yellow. The chairs were old wood. The smell of fresh bread and coffee filled every corner. Yuna dropped her school bag behind the counter and hugged her grandmother. "How was school?" Bora asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "Boring," Yuna said. She was 8 years old and everything was boring except for the cafe. Bora laughed and gave her a cookie. "Go do your homework, I will bring you milk." Yuna took the cookie but did not go to her usual table. Something caught her eye. Someone new was sitting in the corner, the darkest corner of the cafe where the sunlight never reached. He was tall, very tall. His skin was silver like the moon on a clear night. His eyes were deep purple, almost black. He wore a long, dark coat that covered most of his body. In front of him sat a cup of black tea. He was not drinking it. He was just staring out the window. Yuna had seen many aliens before. Neo Seoul was full of them now. Blue ones, green ones, ones with 4 arms, ones with no arms at all. But this one felt different. The air around him felt heavy like before a storm. The other customers in the cafe kept looking at him, then quickly looking away. Even the adults seemed nervous. "Grandma," Yuna whispered, "who is that?" Bora glanced at the corner and her eyes became careful. "He has been coming for 3 days. He orders tea and sits alone. He does not talk to anyone." "He looks sad," Yuna said. "Some people carry heavy things inside them," Bora replied. "It is not our place to ask about it." Yuna nodded, but she kept watching the stranger. He did not move. He did not check any device. He just sat there like a statue made of moonlight and shadow. His purple eyes were empty in a way that made Yuna's chest hurt. She thought about what her grandmother always said. Kindness costs nothing, but it can be worth everything. Before Bora could stop her, Yuna grabbed a plate of fresh cookies and walked toward the dark corner. The stranger did not notice her at first. He was lost somewhere far away, in thoughts that Yuna could not imagine. When her small shadow fell across his table, his eyes moved slowly to look at her. Yuna felt something then, a pressure like standing at the bottom of a deep ocean. For just a moment she felt very small, smaller than she had ever felt in her life. But she did not run away. "Hello," she said. "These are cookies. My grandma made them. They are really good." The stranger said nothing. His purple eyes studied her like she was something he had never seen before. In truth, she was. No one had approached him like this in a very long time. No one had dared. Hidden across the cafe, a tall alien with gray skin tensed. This was Admiral Tiho, head of security for the most powerful being in the galaxy. He was ready to act if the child posed any threat, but he also knew she did not. She was just a small human girl with a plate of cookies. The stranger finally spoke. His voice was deep and quiet like distant thunder. "Why are you giving these to me?" Yuna tilted her head. "Because you look sad, and cookies make people happy." "I am not people," he said. "You are a person," Yuna replied as if this was obvious. "You have eyes and hands and you drink tea. That makes you a person." Something flickered in those purple eyes. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. The stranger had ruled an empire for 400 years. He had commanded fleets that could destroy worlds. Billions of beings feared him. Trillions more had never even seen his face. And here was a child, telling him what made someone a person. "What is your name?" he asked. "Yuna, what is yours?" He paused. He could not tell her his real title. Even on this small planet, far from the center of the galaxy, There were those who would recognize the name of the Galactic Emperor. "You may call me Mr. V," he said. Yuna smiled. It was a bright smile, full of missing teeth and pure happiness. "That is a funny name, but I like it." She sat down across from him without asking permission. Admiral Tiho nearly choked on his drink. No one sat with the Emperor without invitation. No one. But Vorin, the ancient ruler of 47 star systems, did not stop her. He did not know why. Perhaps it was the novelty of the situation. Perhaps it was the strange feeling of being treated like an ordinary person. Perhaps he was simply too tired to care about protocol anymore. "Why do you always look so sad?" Yuna asked, taking a cookie for herself. Vorin considered the question. He thought about the endless meetings, the political games, the weight of decisions that affected trillions of lives. He thought about the loneliness that came with power so vast that no one could be his equal. He thought about the centuries of isolation, surrounded by servants and soldiers but never by friends. "I suppose I have forgotten how not to be," he said. Yuna nodded slowly as if this made perfect sense. "That is very sad, but it is okay. I can teach you." "Teach me what?" "How to be happy," she said simply. "It is not hard, you just have to know the right things." Vorin almost laughed. Almost. The idea that this tiny creature, this human child who had lived for only 8 years, could teach him anything seemed absurd. He had studied with the greatest minds in the galaxy. He had learned secrets that most beings could not comprehend. He had seen the birth and death of stars. But he did not laugh, because when he looked into Yuna's eyes, he saw something he had not seen in a very long time. Hope, pure, simple, unbroken hope. "Very well," he said, surprising himself. "Teach me." Yuna grinned and pushed the plate of cookies closer to him. "First lesson, try a cookie. You cannot be sad when you eat something delicious." Vorin looked at the small brown circle on the plate. His species did not need food in the way humans did. He had not eaten for pleasure in over a century. Slowly, carefully, he picked up the cookie and took a small bite. It was sweet. It was warm. It tasted like something from a simpler time, a time before he carried the weight of an empire. "Well," Yuna asked eagerly, "is it good?" The Galactic Emperor, ruler of the Aldine Dominion, conqueror of worlds, looked at the small human girl and said the first honest thing he had said in decades. "Yes, it is good." Yuna clapped her hands together. "See, lesson 1 complete. I will come back tomorrow for lesson 2. She jumped up from the chair and ran back to her grandmother, leaving Vorin alone in the corner. But somehow, the corner did not feel as dark as before, and the weight on his shoulders felt just a little bit lighter. Across the café, Admiral Tiho watched in disbelief. He had served the Emperor for 200 years. He had never seen him smile. Until now. It was barely there, just a small curve at the corner of his silver lips, but it was real. And it was because of a little girl with a plate of cookies. True to her word, Yuna came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Every afternoon, when school ended, she would run to Starlight Café. She would drop her bag, hug her grandmother, grab whatever treat was fresh from the oven, and march straight to the dark corner where Mr. V waited. At first, Vorin told himself he was simply curious. Humans were a young species, barely a few thousand years old. They had only discovered space travel recently. They were weak, short-lived, fragile, and yet they had spread across the stars faster than any species in recorded history. He wanted to understand why. That was what he told himself. But the truth was simpler. He was lonely, and for some reason he could not explain, this small girl made him feel less alone. On the 4th day, Yuna brought 2 glasses of chocolate milk to the table. "Today's lesson is very important," she said seriously. "You have to learn how to blow bubbles." Vorin looked at the brown liquid in the glass. A straw stuck out from the top. "Blow bubbles." "Yes, watch me." Yuna put the straw in her mouth and blew. The chocolate milk bubbled and frothed, rising up like a small mountain of foam. She laughed with delight at her own creation. "Now you try," she said. Vorin stared at the glass. The Emperor of the Aldine Dominion did not blow bubbles in chocolate milk. It was beneath his dignity. It was childish. It was pointless. But Yuna was watching him with those big, expectant eyes. He put the straw in his mouth and blew. The milk bubbled. It frothed. It rose up and spilled over the edge of the glass, making a mess on the table. Yuna burst into laughter, not mocking laughter but pure joy. "You did it too hard," she giggled. "But that is okay. I made the same mistake when I was little." When she was little, Vorin almost smiled. She was still little. She was the smallest being he had ever spent time with, and somehow she made him feel like he was learning something important. They cleaned up the mess together. Vorin had never cleaned anything in his life. There had always been servants for that, but Yuna handed him a napkin and showed him how to wipe the table, and he did it without complaint. On the 7th day, Yuna introduced him to the Café cat. The cat was old and fat and orange. His name was Nabai, which meant butterfly. He spent most of his time sleeping on a cushion near the window. "You have to say hello to him every time you come in," Yuna explained. "And you have to say thank you when you leave." "Why?" Vorin asked. "He is an animal. He does not understand words." Yuna looked at him like he had said something very foolish. "That does not matter. It is about being polite. Nabai lives here too. He deserves respect." Vorin looked at the sleeping cat. In his empire there were species that were treated as lesser beings. Species that were conquered, ruled, controlled. He had never questioned it. That was simply how things were. But here was a child, telling him that even a small, sleeping cat deserved respect. He bent down, feeling strange and awkward, and said, "Hello, Nabai." The cat opened one eye, looked at him, and went back to sleep. "See," Yuna said happily, "he likes you." Vorin was not sure that was true, but he found himself saying hello to the cat every time he entered the cafe after that, and thank you every time he left. On the 12th day, Yuna took him outside to watch the sunset. They sat on a bench behind the cafe. The sky turned orange, then pink, then purple. The first stars appeared, tiny lights in the growing darkness. "Is it not beautiful?" Yuna asked. Vorin had seen things that would take the breath away from most beings. He had watched binary stars dance around each other. He had flown through nebulas painted in colors that had no names. He had stood on the edge of black holes and felt the pull of infinite gravity. But he had always watched alone. "Yes," he said quietly, "it is beautiful." Yuna leaned against his arm. It was a simple gesture, the kind of thing a child might do with a parent or a grandparent. Vorin froze. No one touched him, ever. His body was considered sacred. Even his closest servants kept their distance. But Yuna did not know any of that. She just saw a lonely friend who needed warmth. So Vorin sat very still and let her lean against him. And for the first time in centuries, he felt something close to peace. On the 20th day, Yuna taught him how to fold paper cranes. She brought colorful paper from her school bag and spread it on the table. "In Korea, we have a story," she said. "If you fold 1,000 paper cranes, you get a wish." "A wish?" Vorin asked. "What kind of wish?" "Any wish you want, but it has to be a good wish, not a selfish one." Vorin watched as her small fingers moved quickly, folding and creasing the paper until a tiny bird appeared. It was not perfect. One wing was larger than the other, but Yuna held it up proudly. "Your turn," she said. Vorin's fingers were long and silver. They had signed treaties that ended wars. They had pressed buttons that launched fleets. They had held the weight of worlds. Now they struggled to fold a piece of paper. His first crane looked like a crumpled ball. Yuna laughed and helped him try again. His second crane was better. His third was almost recognizable as a bird. You are getting good at this, Yuna said encouragingly. What would you wish for? Vorin asked. If you folded 1,000 cranes. Yuna thought about it seriously. I think I would wish for everyone to be happy. My grandma, my friends at school, you. Me. Yes, you. She looked at him with those clear, honest eyes. You are always sad, Mr. V. I wish you could be happy. Vorin did not know what to say. He had been offered many things in his long life. Planets, fleets, power beyond imagination. But no one had ever offered him something so simple and so precious. What do you want to be when you grow up? He asked, changing the subject because he did not trust his own voice. Yuna did not hesitate. Kind like my grandmother. Not powerful, not wealthy, not famous, just kind. Vorin sat in silence for a long moment. In his empire, children were trained from birth. They learned strategy and politics and warfare. They learned how to command and how to conquer. They did not learn how to be kind. Kindness was seen as weakness. But looking at this small girl with her paper cranes and her simple dreams, Vorin began to wonder if his empire had it all wrong. That is a good thing to be, he said finally. Yuna smiled, and the smile lit up the whole dark corner of the cafe. Grandmother Bora watched from behind the counter. She had been watching for weeks now, seeing the strange friendship grow between her granddaughter and the mysterious alien. She did not know who he really was, but she could see the change in him. When he first came, he had looked like something carved from stone, cold, distant, unreachable. Now when Yuna made him laugh, his whole face changed. He looked younger, he looked alive. Bora was old enough to know that some connections could not be explained. Some friendships were simply meant to happen. The universe brought people together for reasons that only became clear later. So she kept her distance and let them have their time. She made extra cookies and pretended not to notice when Vorin stayed past closing time. And every evening, when Yuna said goodbye to Mr. V, the ancient emperor of the galaxy would sit alone in the corner, holding a small paper crane and thinking about a word he had almost forgotten. Hoping. He was beginning to remember what it felt like. Strange things began happening around Starlight Café. At first, the changes were small. A ship would fly overhead, slower than the others, as if watching. Aliens would pass by on the street and pause, looking through the window with expressions that Grandmother Bora could not read. Some of them seemed surprised. Others seemed afraid. One morning, Bora saw a tall alien with gray skin bow slightly toward the cafe before walking away quickly. She recognized him. He came in sometimes, always ordering water, always sitting where he could see the dark corner. She had thought he was just a quiet customer. But people did not bow to cafes. Yuna did not notice any of this. She was too busy with her new friendship. Every afternoon, she ran to the corner table with her latest idea. She taught Mr. V how to play simple card games. She showed him pictures she drew at school. She told him stories about her classmates and her teachers and the funny things that happened on the playground. Vorin listened to everything. He had advisors who could explain quantum physics and generals who could plan invasions across light years. But none of them had ever told him about a boy named Minyu who put bugs in the teacher's desk, or a girl named Hana who could do a backflip at recess. These small stories felt more real to him than anything he had heard in centuries. But the galaxy would not wait forever. Admiral Tiho approached Vorin one evening after Yuna had gone home. The cafe was empty except for Grandmother Bora, who was cleaning tables and pretending not to listen. Your Eminence, Tiho said quietly, we have received urgent communications. Vorin's jaw tightened. He had told Tiho not to use that title here, but the Admiral was clearly worried enough to forget protocol. What is it? The outer sectors. There is unrest. Some of the governors are speaking of independence. The military council is demanding your return. Vorin closed his eyes. The outer sectors. It was always the outer sectors. They were far from the center of the Dominion, far from his direct control. Every few decades, someone there decided they could do better alone. Every few decades, he had to remind them why they were wrong. "How serious is it?" he asked. "Serious enough that your absence is being noticed." Tiho glanced around nervously. "There are rumors, Your Eminence. Some say you have been captured, others say you are dead. The longer you stay hidden, the bolder our enemies become." Vorin opened his eyes and looked out the window. The sun was setting over Neosol, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in the city, a little girl was probably having dinner with her grandmother, talking about paper cranes and chocolate milk. "I will send a message to the council," he said. "That should quiet them for now." "A message is not enough. They need to see you. The Dominion needs its emperor." Vorin said nothing. He knew Tiho was right. He had known from the beginning that this escape could not last forever. He had ruled for 400 years. He had built an empire that spanned 47 star systems. He had responsibilities that could not be ignored. But for the first time in all those years, he did not want to go back. He did not want to return to the empty throne room, the endless meetings, the weight of a crown that no one could see. He did not want to leave this small cafe with its warm yellow walls and its sleeping cat and its cheerful little girl who asked for nothing but his company. "Give me more time," he said quietly. Tiho hesitated. "How much time?" "I do not know." Vorin looked at his hands, at the fingers that had learned to fold paper cranes. "I need to understand something first." The Admiral wanted to argue. Vorin could see it in his eyes. But Tiho had served the Emperor for 200 years. He knew when to push and when to stay silent. "As you wish, Your Eminence," he said, and retreated to his usual table. Grandmother Bora finished cleaning and walked over to Vorin's corner. She set a fresh cup of tea in front of him without being asked. "You have heavy thoughts tonight," she said. Vorin looked up at her. Bora was old by human standards, her face lined with years and wisdom, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "How can you tell?" he asked. "I have run this cafe for 40 years. I have seen many travelers, many strangers. I know the look of someone who is running from something." Vorin was silent for a moment. Then he asked, "Do you know who I am?" Bora smiled just a little. "I know you are someone important. I know your friend tries very hard to pretend he is not your guard. I know that the ships in the sky are not here by accident. And yet you say nothing." "Everyone who comes to my cafe deserves peace," Bora said. "That is the only rule. It does not matter if you are a student or a merchant or," she paused, "or something else entirely." Vorin looked at this old human woman, this grandmother who baked cookies and served tea, and he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Gratitude. "Your granddaughter," he said carefully, "she is remarkable." Bora's eyes softened. "Yuna sees the good in everyone, even when others cannot see it themselves. She has been that way since she was very small. She has taught me many things." "Has she?" Bora did not seem surprised. "Children often teach us more than we teach them. They remind us of what we have forgotten." She picked up Vorin's empty cup and turned to go, but she paused and looked back at him. "Whatever you are running from," she said quietly, "it will find you eventually. Running never works forever, but maybe what you find along the way will make you strong enough to face it." She walked away, leaving Vorin alone with his thoughts. That night he sat in the dark corner long after the cafe closed. Bora let him stay, locking the door but leaving him inside. The cat, Nabai, wandered over and curled up near his feet. Vorin received another message from the Dominion. The situation in the outer sectors was getting worse. 3 governors had publicly declared their intention to leave the empire. The military was mobilizing. His generals wanted blood. He should have left immediately. He should have returned to his throne and done what he had always done. Crushed the rebellion, made an example of the traitors, restored order through strength and fear. But he kept thinking about what Una had said. She wanted to be kind, like her grandmother. Kindness, such a small word, such a simple concept. And yet in 400 years of rule, Vorin had never considered it as a strategy. He ruled through power, through control, through the fear of what would happen to those who disobeyed. It worked. The dominion was stable, strong, vast. But it was also cold, empty, lonely. He had no friends. He had no family. He had subjects and servants and soldiers, but no one who would sit with him and blow bubbles in chocolate milk. No one who would teach him to fold paper cranes. No one who would ask him why he was sad. Until now. Vorin looked at the sleeping cat and made a decision. He would stay a little longer, not forever. He knew he could not hide from his duties forever, but long enough to understand what this small human girl was teaching him. Long enough to learn how to be kind. He did not know that eyes were watching him, not just Tiho's eyes, but others. Far away in the outer sectors, rebels were gathering intelligence on the missing emperor. They had spies everywhere. They had informants in the imperial court. And soon they would discover exactly where he had been hiding and who he had been spending time with. The danger was coming, but Vorin did not see it yet. He was too busy looking at paper cranes and thinking about a little girl's smile. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Emperor was not paying attention to his enemies. And that was exactly what they were counting on. The attack came on a quiet evening. Una was sitting at the corner table, showing Mr. V a drawing she had made at school. It was a picture of him, tall and silver, holding a paper crane. She had used every purple crayon in her box to get his eyes just right. "This is you," she said proudly. "I am going to hang it on my wall." Vorin looked at the drawing. It was messy, the lines were crooked, and his proportions were all wrong. But something in his chest tightened when he saw it. No one had ever made art for him before. Not like this. Not with love instead of duty. "It is beautiful," he said, and he meant it. Una grinned. "I knew you would like it. Tomorrow I will draw Nabai too, and maybe Grandma, and then we can." She stopped. Something was wrong. Vorin had gone very still. His purple eyes were no longer looking at her. They were looking past her toward the door. Una turned around. 3 figures stood at the entrance of the cafe. They were tall and thin, with dark blue skin and eyes that glowed red. They wore black armor that seemed to absorb the light around them. In their hands, they held weapons that hummed with energy. Grandmother Bora stepped back from the counter, fear crossing her face for the first time Una had ever seen. "Get behind me," Vorin said quietly. His voice was different now, deeper, harder, the voice of someone who was used to giving orders. "Mr. V," Una whispered, "who are they?" "Do not worry," he said. "I will not let them hurt you." The leader of the 3 figures smiled. It was not a nice smile. "So the rumors are true. The great emperor hiding in a human cafe. How pathetic." "Emperor?" Una's eyes went wide. She looked at Mr. V. He was standing now, his full height suddenly seeming much taller than before. The tiredness was gone from his face. Something else was there now, something ancient and dangerous and powerful. "You should not have come here," Vorin said. "We go where we please," the leader replied. "The outer sectors no longer answer to you. Soon the whole galaxy will be free of your rule. I have no quarrel with you. Leave now and I will forget this happened." The leader laughed. "Leave. We are not here to fight you, Emperor. We know we cannot win that battle. We are here for something else." His glowing red eyes moved to Una. "We are here for the girl." Everything happened very fast. Admiral Tiho burst through the back door, weapon drawn. The 3 attackers moved toward Una. Grandmother Bora screamed. And then the world turned white. Vorin raised his hand and light exploded from his palm. Not fire, not electricity, something older, something that came from the core of stars themselves. The light formed a shield around the café. It wrapped around Yuna, around Bora, around everything inside those warm yellow walls. The attackers were thrown backward, their weapons useless against energy that could reshape planets. Yuna covered her eyes against the brightness. When she could see again, the three attackers were on the ground, wrapped in chains of pure light. Admiral Tiho stood over them, his weapon pointed at their heads. But Yuna was not looking at them. She was looking at Mr. V. He had changed. The tired, lonely man she had known was gone. In his place stood something else. His silver skin glowed with inner light. His purple eyes burned like distant galaxies. He seemed to fill the whole room, bigger than his body, older than time itself. He was terrifying. And he was beautiful. "Your Eminence," Tiho said, bowing his head. "The area is secure. More forces are on their way." Vorin did not respond. He was watching Yuna with an expression she had never seen before. Fear. Not fear of her, but fear of what she might think. Fear of what she might say. The light faded. The shield dissolved. The café returned to normal, except for the three prisoners on the floor and the scorch marks on the walls. Yuna stood very still for a long moment. Her grandmother rushed to her side, pulling her close, checking her for injuries. But Yuna's eyes never left Vorin's face. Finally she spoke. "Mr. V," she said quietly, "are you really an emperor?" Vorin knelt down so that he was at her level. It was strange, seeing someone so powerful make himself small. But he did it without hesitation. "Yes," he said, "I am sorry I did not tell you the truth." "An emperor of what?" "Of many worlds, many stars, many people." He paused. "I rule an empire that stretches across the galaxy." Yuna thought about this. Her 8-year-old mind tried to understand the size of what he was describing. Worlds, stars, galaxies, it was too big. She could not picture it. "Are you a good emperor?" she asked. The question caught Vorin off guard. He had expected fear. He had expected anger. He had expected her to run away from him like everyone else did when they learned who he really was. But she asked if he was good. "I try to be," he said slowly, "but I am not sure anymore." "Why not?" "Because good emperors do not hide from their duties. Good emperors do not run away to small planets and spend their days learning to fold paper cranes." Yuna reached out and took his hand. His silver skin was warm against her small fingers. "I think good emperors are the ones who learn," she said. "You came here because you were sad. You stayed because you wanted to be happy. That is not running away. That is getting stronger." Vorin stared at her. This child. This tiny, fragile human child who should have been afraid of him. She was holding his hand and telling him that he was getting stronger. "Are you not afraid of me?" he asked. Yuna considered this seriously. "A little bit," she admitted. "You looked very scary when you were glowing. But I am not afraid of you, Mr. V. I am only afraid of the scary glowing part." Despite everything, Vorin laughed. It was a real laugh, full and warm, the kind of laugh that surprised even himself. "The scary glowing part is also me," he said. "I know, but that is not all of you. You are also the person who drinks tea and folds paper cranes and says hello to Nabai. That is the real Mr. V. The glowing part is just extra." Grandmother Bora had been listening quietly this whole time. Now she stepped forward, her arms still around Yuna's shoulders. "She is right, you know," Bora said. "Power does not define a person. What they do with that power does." Vorin looked at the old woman and the young girl. Two humans, small and weak and temporary by galactic standards, but braver than any general he had ever commanded, wiser than any advisor who had ever served him. He made a decision. "Tiho," he said, standing up, "contact the fleet. I want a full security detail around this location. No one approaches without my permission." "Yes, Your Eminence." "And contact the council. Tell them I am returning soon, but first there are things I must do here." Tiho bowed and hurried away, already speaking into his communication device. Yuna tugged on Voron's sleeve. "You are leaving." The sadness in her voice broke something inside him. "Not yet," he said softly, "not yet." He sat back down at the corner table, at the spot where he had spent so many afternoons learning to be human again. Yuna sat across from him, just like always. The cafe was damaged. The walls were scorched. The attackers were being dragged away by arriving soldiers. But in the corner, a little girl and an emperor sat together like nothing had changed. "Are you still sad?" Yuna asked. Voron looked at her messy hair and her bright eyes and her drawing of him holding a paper crane. "Less than I was," he said, "because of you." And then Yuna did something that made every soldier in the room freeze in shock. She hugged him. She wrapped her small arms around the Galactic Emperor, the most powerful being in 47 star systems, and she hugged him like he was her grandfather or her friend, or just a lonely man who needed warmth. Voron sat very still. No one had hugged him in 400 years. His body was sacred. His person was untouchable. But Yuna did not know any of that, and even if she did, she would not have cared. So the Emperor of the Aldine Dominion, conqueror of worlds and master of fleets, sat in a small cafe on a small planet and let a little girl hug him. And for the first time in centuries, he felt like he was home. 3 days had passed since the attack on Starlight Café. The cafe had been repaired quickly. Workers from Voron's flagship had come down in the night and fixed every wall, replaced every window, cleaned every scorch mark. By morning, it looked like nothing had happened. But something had changed. Everyone in Neosol knew now that the quiet stranger in the corner was not just a traveler. He was the Galactic Emperor. Some people were afraid. They whispered that Voron would punish Earth for what had happened, that he would bring his armies and destroy the planet that had put him in danger. But Grandmother Bora just kept baking cookies and serving tea. She knew better. Yuna still came every afternoon. She ignored the soldiers who now stood guard outside the cafe. She ignored the strange looks from the other customers. She walked straight to the corner table and sat down like she always did. "Are you leaving today?" she asked. Voron nodded slowly. "Yes, I must return to my empire. There are problems I can no longer ignore." He had received many messages in the past 3 days. The rebellion in the outer sectors had grown. 5 governors had now declared independence. His generals were ready for war. The Dominion needed its emperor. Yuna looked down at the table. Her hands were folded in front of her, very still. She was trying hard not to cry. "I knew you would have to go," she said quietly, "but I do not want you to." "I know, I do not want to go either." They sat in silence for a moment. The cafe hummed with its usual sounds, coffee brewing, dishes clinking, the soft purr of Nabai sleeping by the window. "Before I leave," Voron said, "I want to give you something." Yuna looked up. "A present?" "Yes, I want you to tell me what you would like, anything at all." Yuna thought about this. Her 8-year-old mind tried to imagine what a galactic emperor could give: spaceships, treasure, a planet of her own. She had heard soldiers talking about the things Voron controlled: fleets that could block out the sun, weapons that could shatter moons, riches beyond counting. But none of that seemed interesting to her. "Can I think about it?" she asked. Voron smiled. "Take your time." While Yuna thought, Voron stood and walked to the counter where Grandmother Bora was preparing tea. The old woman looked up at him with calm eyes. "You are leaving today," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, but before I go I must thank you." Bora shook her head. "There is nothing to thank me for. You were a customer. I served you tea." "You gave me peace," Voron said. "You gave me time. You let me hide in your cafe when I needed to escape from myself. That is not nothing." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small device. It was flat and silver, no bigger than a coin. "This is a direct communication device," he explained. "If you ever need anything at all, you may use this to contact me. I will answer." Bora looked at the device but did not take it. "I am just an old woman who runs a cafe. What would I ever need from a galactic emperor?" "I hope you never need anything, but if you do, I want you to have the option." Bora studied his face for a long moment. Then she took the device and slipped it into her apron pocket. "Thank you," she said, "for being good to my granddaughter. She does not have many friends. Her parents are gone, her world is small, you made it bigger." Vorin felt a weight in his chest. Yuna's parents were gone, she had never mentioned this. He had never asked. "She made my world smaller," he said quietly, "in the best possible way." He returned to the corner table, where Yuna was still thinking hard. Her face was scrunched up with concentration. "Have you decided?" he asked. Yuna nodded slowly. "I think so, but it is a strange wish." "Tell me." She looked up at him with those big, honest eyes. "Can you come back sometimes, for cookies?" Vorin had been prepared for many requests. He had expected her to ask for wealth or power or protection. He had expected her to ask for something big and impressive, something worthy of an imperial gift. But she asked him to come back, for cookies. He laughed. It was a real laugh, deep and warm, the kind that comes from somewhere you had forgotten existed. Some of the soldiers outside the cafe glanced in, confused. They had never heard their emperor laugh like that. "Yes," he said, "I will come back for cookies." Yuna smiled, and the smile lit up the whole cafe. "There is something else," Vorin said. "Something I want to give you even though you did not ask for it." He stood and raised his voice so that the soldiers outside could hear. "From this day forward, Earth is under the protection of the Aldine Dominion. No fleet may approach without permission. No species may threaten its people. This world is classified as a culturally significant planet, preserved for study and appreciation." The soldiers snapped to attention, recording his words. Within hours, this decree would spread across the galaxy. Every species, every empire, every power would know that Earth was off limits. Yuna looked confused. "What does that mean?" "It means your world is safe, forever." "Because of the cafe." Vorin knelt down in front of her. "Because of you. Because you taught me something I had forgotten. Something that I think my whole empire has forgotten." "What?" "Kindness. Simple, quiet kindness. You did not care that I was powerful. You did not fear me or worship me. You just saw someone who was sad and tried to make him happy. That is more valuable than all the ships in my fleet." Yuna did not fully understand. She was too young to know about galactic politics or power dynamics or the weight of an empire. But she understood the important part. "You are not sad anymore?" she asked hopefully. Vorin thought about it. The truth was he was still sad. He was still lonely. He was still tired of the responsibilities that awaited him, but something was different now. "I am less sad," he said, "and I know now that I can become even less sad over time, because I have a friend who will teach me how." Admiral Tiho approached carefully. "Your Eminence, the shuttle is ready." Vorin nodded but did not stand up. "Not yet." "I will send messages," he told Yuna, "and I will visit when I can. It may not be often, but I will always come back." "Promise." He held up his hand, pinky extended. Yuna had taught him this. A pinky promise, she had explained, was the most serious kind of promise a human could make. She linked her small pinky with his silver one. "Promise," he said. Then he stood, straightened his coat, and walked toward the door. He paused at the window and bent down to look at the sleeping cat. "Goodbye, Nabai," he said softly. "Thank you." The cat opened one eye, looked at him, and went back to sleep. Vorin smiled and walked out of Starlight Café. The shuttle was waiting in the street. It was sleek and silver, clearly imperial in design. Soldiers stood in perfect rows on either side. Citizens of Neosol had gathered to watch, their faces filled with awe and fear. But Vorin did not look at any of them. He looked back one last time at the café. Yuna was standing in the window, pressing her hand against the glass. He raised his hand in return. Then he boarded the shuttle and rose into the sky. 3 months later, a small package arrived at Starlight Café. Inside was a paper crane made of silver metal, so delicate that it seemed impossible to have been made by mortal hands. A note was attached, written in careful, formal handwriting. It read, "Lesson 1000, I made a wish. Thank you for teaching me." Yuna hung the silver crane next to her drawing on her bedroom wall. Every night before she went to sleep, she would look at it and smile. Somewhere across the galaxy, in the throne room of the Aldine Dominion, the Emperor sat in his great chair and addressed his council. His voice was firm, his decisions swift, his power undeniable. But on his desk, beside the reports and treaties and maps of empire, sat a small paper crane made of colorful paper. One wing was slightly larger than the other. It was not perfect. His advisors did not understand why he kept it. Some thought it was a diplomatic gift from a strange alien species. Others thought it was a symbol of some important treaty. They were wrong. It was not a gift from a species or a symbol of power. It was a reminder. A reminder that the greatest lesson he had ever learned did not come from scholars or generals or ancient texts. It came from a little girl in a small cafe on a small planet at the edge of the galaxy. A little girl who asked why he was sad and then taught him how to be happy. The galaxy had feared humanity for their aggression, their unpredictability, their rapid expansion across the stars. Other species had prepared for war, for competition, for conflict. But they had missed the truth. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their ships or their soldiers or their technology. It was their kindness. And that kindness had changed the course of an empire, one cookie at a time.